Hi, I'm Inksy. Welcome to this video. I've just seen some of the recent news on the fines levied towards the time waster in Waifu Simulator number 1, well, we all know it as Genshin Impact, and I thought I would add some commentary around it. This is going to come from the perspective of someone who used to work in the gambling industry. We used to make digital and land-based games for casinos and various operators, so basically sites that have gambling apps in them. In short, I think this is a necessary change, not just to gachas. We all know that Genshin Impact is being targeted purely due to the current lukewarm war with China. It's TikTok, Genshin Impact, and all other China products. But the essence of it, and perhaps what it heralds changes to come, is important, because this really needs to be applied to loot boxes as well in Western games, not just gachas. So basically, from a degenerate who worked in gambling games, I can say that video games are way worse than casino games. Let me explain why. For background, as I said, I used to work in the gambling industry, multinational giants that provided land-based games for casinos and apps for phones, desktops, and so forth. We mostly focused on slot games, some sports betting, and card games. But we were also slowly starting to get into the esports market. My role within this industry was that of a product manager, project manager, QA manager, and dealing with regulatory compliance issues. I also had extensive contact with operators and regulators for all issues in production, so any games that were live, if there were any problems with them, generally I was the person who would handle those. So what I'm going to talk about is less about Genshin Impact itself or gacha games, but I just want to provide some insights and perspective. Hopefully you'll find something interesting to think about. If not, well, it's just a second monitor background noise, you know, while you hate play League of Legends or World of Warcraft. So my focus will mostly be around actual gambling development, regulations, some examples of them, and how normal video games are actually way worse than those games are. Far more predatorial. Which is kinda hilarious, if you think about it, because these games are made for children. Important to note that I will be speaking about regulated markets. I cannot talk about grey markets. A bit later on that, but these will not apply to some random Ugandan crypto casino. So where to start? Right, so the main issue lies with legislators, really. They're always 10 to 20 years behind the curve, you know, because they're 70-year-olds that should have retired. And they're always very, very slow to react. Unless it's some giant corporation lobbying to ban their competition, because it's sitting on their market share. Then legislators are surprisingly fast and their bank accounts are surprisingly full. We know how it works. You can see, for example, TikTok. China is just an excuse. We all know that it's just corporates trying to put it in their place and get back their market share. Okay, so this is mostly about regulated markets, as I said, not grey markets. In fact, the reason why I quit this job, and about 30 other people, is because we were starting to consider entering grey markets, such as Japan. We saw it as an ethical issue and made our concerns known. For a while, people actively refused to work in games that were going to those markets. After about a year, since there was no change, about half of us, so around 40 people, handed our resignations. We left high-paying jobs. You know, sometimes people do have a spine. It's rare, but it does happen. Okay, so how are gacha or loot boxes worse than real gambling? Well, it's about regulations. All the regulations that exist to protect kids and those that are most vulnerable to those practices already exist, except they only apply to casino games. They do not apply to normal video games. And this is where the issue lies. It would be very easy to just extend one to the other. The majority of the regulations aim specifically at destroying dark patterns and engagement cycles, addiction, and a variety of other things. Specifically children, for example. I'll get into those. Another caveat is that regulations vary from country to country, and in some places such as the US and Canada, they can vary at the state level. However, most of these regulators use each other as a basis, especially UKGC, so the regulators for the UK. The majority of US, Canada, and so forth, because will base their regulations off whatever the UK does. So I think we can speak in generalities. What applies to one will sooner or later apply to the others. Alright, enough preamble, let's get straight into the one that actually makes sense with Genshin Impact, and it's to do with thematics. So in regulations, no gambling games can have art styles, themes, or events that can be seen as made for children or using children's intellectual properties or made targeting children. For example, these would include things as fairy tales. You cannot make a My Little Mermaid game or a My Little Pony game. You might wonder why. Why does that matter? Because children cannot access these websites. They cannot enter a casino. Well, there's two main reasons. The first one is there's the odd chance that a kid can be watching their parent play the games and become interested in it. And the major issue is to do with advertisements, so website ads or advertisements in buses or stores, which children could see and be enticed by. And this is one of the arguments that you can see to levy towards Genshin Impact, that the art style is made to incentivize children, it's targeting children. And I, in a way, can agree with this. Other mechanisms that exist are, for example, reality checks. So if you played a certain amount of time, it will have a pop-up that informs you of that. Say every hour it says, hey, you have been playing for an hour, do you wish to continue? You've spent this much money. There's also automation tools such as autoplay, which allows the player to set a total amount of money they can spend in this session, how many spins it can go forth, and so on. Another recent change, and this is quite refreshing, is the curbing of practices such as losses disguised as wins. So what does that mean? Well, when the game celebrates a win line in a slot, for example, and you actually lost money instead of winning. Say you wager $10, you spin, you get some win lines showing, but you actually just won $8. So nowhere you can use the word win. It's not a win, you actually lost $2 total, right? So the regulations make sure that you cannot celebrate this visually or audio. You need to use simple tunes that are distinct from tunes used while actually winning. So what does this do? This is to stop misleading information from happening. It's really to break the dopamine addiction, what we call chasing the dragon, or ADHD farming really. ADHD people are the prime target. Games are made to be as overwhelming and tension-catching as possible to keep players engaged. Ironically, this is not allowed in casino games. Well, to a certain extent, but not in excess. But in a video game, this is the prime thing that everyone does, to try to creep your attention into the game to keep you playing as long as possible. There's some other mechanisms as well. These are at the operator level. For example, they can limit how much you can spend in a single day or how much money you can spend in a single week. None of these things exist in video games with loot boxes or gachas. You also cannot, for example, advertise things that are not realistically achievable. For example, you cannot say that you can win up to 10,000 times your wager if the chances of getting that is lower than a certain amount. I believe it was 1 in 10,000 plays. This is still quite high, but at least it is within the realm of possibility. In places such as Norway, for example, they make the games purposely boring to limit the gameplay. For example, you can only wage, say, 10 krona per second of gameplay. This means if you want to be able to play, say, 100 krona, which is the equivalent of about $8, you need to wait 10 seconds between plays. You could very easily apply this to loot boxes. You can only open a loot box per minute, for example. It would make it boring, yeah, but it would also help stop the dopamine hit cycle. Most markets also make it mandatory that you need to display the odds of achieving certain results. For example, to get a skin, you need to say what's the odds of getting it. Because in the end, this is all predetermined. Even in games for casinos, the moment you press play, the game will send a communication to the server will randomize an event and send to the client the result. So everything that is happening between you pressing spin and the actual end result is just choreography, it's window dressing, it's not real, everything is already done and decided. As a side note, in regulated markets there is no fixing, cheating or anything like that. There's third-party companies that have to certify the math model, the game engine, the game client. We provide them with the source code. They take about 6 weeks to review this and then certify that everything is okay. So in a real casino, you will never be cheated out. There's no such thing. There's no fixing, and practices such as reducing the RTP if you win too much are not allowed. This cannot happen. Well, obviously this is not accounting for bugs. Those are sometimes inevitable. No matter how strict we are, sometimes, well, we just fuck up and bugs are in the game, and sometimes you can be paid less than you should have. But we all actively monitor for this. We keep a constant eye on the RTP, wagers and so forth. And if there's ever any issue, the casino immediately contacts us, or we contact the casino and we correct this as soon as possible, generally around a week. If the issue is significant enough, then we will actually take the game down so no players can play it, even if the odds of getting that specific issue is minuscule, like 1 in 10 million. It doesn't matter. Casinos also actively, constantly monitor wagers and wins. If someone wins above a certain threshold, for example, they can hold back the payment and send it to us to make sure that the win is legitimate, that there's no cheating involved. There are also active methods to try and detect money laundering or unfair play. Some do more than others, not everyone does this, but if someone is spending too much money, generally there's someone who will keep an eye on it. We would actually many times just watch whales play. It's kind of surreal to watch someone spend $500 to $1,000 in a single spin and then just play it for hours, seeing 3, 5, 4 million just go through a single day. There was this guy who spent around 20 million playing digital blackjack around a week. It was funny because I sort of wanted to just reach out to him, tell him I'd fly to him, dress in a bunny outfit, and just be his dealer for an entire week if he wanted. Hey, happy ending included for a percentage of the wager. If he was so desperate to waste money like that, I mean, he would get something out of it, right? Oh yeah, I was not allowed to do that. As a side note on that, there are several protections where you cannot show the name. However, some operators are very sloppy with that. It's not meant to be done. Sometimes they would sort of dox the player, show their real name, their emails. Every time this happened, we would be very quick to edit the support desk tickets and remove all this information, and then nag them about it. While this is all kept internally in secure servers, it's still a horrible practice. It should never happen. But some people would do it. Anyway, enough of random life experiences, bringing back to these video games. This is in no way an extensive list of regulations or anything like that. I just wanted to give a list of examples of regulations that already exist and could be very easily implemented in gacha games or loot box games. And I wanted to highlight how ironic that actual casino games have way more protections against dark patterns and use of psychology to make the games addictive or things like that, while normal video games made for children do not. Some of these companies will hire psychologists to make them as addictive as possible, to keep the player engaged for as long as possible, to make them as helpless and needing the game as possible. None of this happens with casino games. Not only does not happen, it's actually forbidden by law. And we spend active effort into making sure that we break dark patterns in our games. We make sure that the games are not as addictive as they could be. We try to strike a balance. Obviously we need to make them engaging, but we cannot make them unethically addictive. So this is unethical, and I cannot wait until regulations start rolling out to games. For example, Counter-Strike, Overwatch, Warzone, and so forth. Any game that has loot boxes, it is gambling if you can buy them for real money. Actually, it's worse than gambling. If you think about it, in gambling you can strike it rich. The odds are minuscule. Please never try to do this as a way to get money, but you can. Meanwhile, your waifus, well, they're gone. As soon as the servers shut down, the company loses money, or they make a new game and shut it down, well, you lose everything you had. And currently they are under absolutely no obligation to maintain the servers up longer than they want to. In fact, I think this is a legislation that should also happen. If you buy a game, you should have permanent access for it. If they do not want to keep the servers up, that's fine. They need to release the source code for everyone else, so they can keep playing the game if they want to. Either way, if you spend £10,000 in your hottest waifus trying to get those wonderfully lewd and degenerate outfits, or you're modding it, well, it can all be gone and rendered void in a second. I mean, at least you still get something out of it, right? It's hot, let's be honest. But in games that are first person like Overwatch, bro, you can't even see the skins. What are you doing? So if you really want to spend 10, 20, 50,000 pounds or dollars into a loot skin, well, you know, I still have that bunny boy outfit if you want. And anyway, this is a long time coming, and make no mistake, this will become increasingly common as the old fossils in charge of policies start realizing what has been happening. And maybe with a slightly more conscientious president in power, maybe he'll start putting the grips into it. Maybe not, because, you know, he loves corporations and all the practices, but one can hope. Perhaps this will change. Alright, that's all. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching to the end, regardless if you liked it or not. And I hope I've given you something to think about, or at least distracted you for about 15 minutes. Haunt you on the next one. Stay lewd. Bye!